Hello, everybody. Welcome to another broadcast from Quest Outdoors. Bringing you some good information today on using outfitters, the reason that you would use an outfitter. So Don and I, Jay, here with you, going to go through some stuff here and hopefully you find it interesting. So Don, tell me, if you will, what are some of the reasons that an individual may find using an outfitter advantageous?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of reasons, but I can name off some. Like maybe you don't have any land in general to hunt on your own. You don't have any place to go. You don't have anybody to show you how to hunt. You don't have any direction, so you hire an outfitter so that they can show you, take you to the hunting, and guide you. If you have limited time, that could be another reason. If you're handicapped, that could be a reason. Or maybe you just have the money and you have a good job and you can afford to hire an outfitter. So I personally hired an outfitter because my hunting pressure got pretty bad on some of the properties I hunt. The deer hunting changed, so I thought I could use an outfitter once in a while to, reach my goals of hunting bigger deer. Older deer.
So sometimes it's an opportunity to take advantage of new setting, new objectives, and potentially even larger bucks when you get a lot of pressure for where you're hunting, where your normal hunting spot is, right?
That's correct. There's, I used to think I would never need an outfitter. I had pretty good success on state land and properties that I've hunted for the last 50 years. Right. So I never thought that was going to happen, but there are reasons. You might want to take your child who's never had an opportunity, and maybe your properties don't have those opportunities anymore. So you might want to hire an outfitter, which, you don't have the stress of trying to figure it out yourself. So it's a good idea that you find an outfitter that's going to suit your needs. There's many types of hunters out there today. There's experienced hunters. There's hunters that it's their first year to hunt. They're new to it. They're young. There's hunters that just want to go and have a good time. They don't want to have to make any of the arrangements themselves, whereas the outfitter does that all themselves, right? They have lodging, they have food, they have stands, they have transportation. They supply all that, so that that fits the needs of a lot of people. There's people that live in the city that can't get out of the city only once a week to go hunting, so they want to hire an outfitter, right? That seems to fit the category of a lot of the hunters that I have seen in camps throughout my history of hunting. And that history includes Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, Ohio, Colorado, New Mexico, Montana, Wyoming. So I've been in a few states, and I've used a few outfitters. That does include big game and whitetail deer, both. So
the overall experience getting out and working with an outfitter who's supposedly should know the property that you're hunting well, right? I mean, these guys that manage property, these outfitters, professionally, there should be some expert level knowledge of the area, and you would hope that the experience would be a positive one, right?
Yes, and we've compiled a list of what you should be looking for in relation to what you just said when you're looking to hire an outfitter. This should help everybody. I mean, first you're going to look at the lodging. Now you may not necessarily be there to actually see it, but nowadays with all the information that's out there, you can look at their website and you can see their buildings. So you can kind of get an idea what kind of lodging they have. You also want to this is going to help you with lodging and food, that accommodations. If an outfitter offers references, that's really what you want to look for. You want to, and you
credibility. Credibility is important. Yeah.
Yeah. You want to, if they got 10 references and you speak to all 10 of them, for example, and 5 of them have a really positive, very positive attitude about what happened in their experience, and the other 5, they're kind of in the middle, but they they do recommend them, then that's kind of a good, and they can tell you what the food was like and what the lodging was like. We all understand that. So I think that that's probably the number one thing you ought to be looking at. And, how much property do they have? Do they have several farms they're hunting, or do they have one solid, a piece of property somewhere? So, and what is their deer density? Can they answer that question? What has their success rate been for the last 10 years if they've been in business that long? How much experience do they have guiding? Is their success rate better with archery or gun? And what I found out, and we're archery hunters here mainly, we do gun hunt, but we do archery hunt. That's our number one priority. Most of them will tell you that, of course we all know the success rate with deer hunting with a bow is a lot less than a gun. But I found out through the years, and going back 25, 30, all the way up to today, that they're starting to cater to deer hunters with bows now, archery, but they're really their money's in the gun hunting.
Yeah.
If you follow what I'm saying, they're continual customers that
higher
come
success
back.
ratios. Yeah.
The success rate is higher. They're getting better with deer hunters nowadays, with archery, but that's really where their money bag is at. And how much knowledge do they have of the property? Do they use trail cameras? Do they know where the bedding areas are? Do they know where the food is? Do they know when their rut is in their area, whatever state it is? Do they know the travel patterns of the deer? If you ask an outfitter all of these questions that we're feeding you with, there's a possibility that they may not want to answer all those questions. If they don't, then that's probably not a good idea. You want to go there. And our last a subject that's really number one is how much pressure is on their properties. In other words, how many hunters did they run through their season? If their season starts October 1st and it goes to the end of December, how many hunters did they run there? Gun hunters, muzzleloader, archery. How many do they run per week? If their hunting season or their outfit per week is 5 days, you hunt 5 days. In other words, I'm saying you start on Monday, for example, and you go to Friday. How many guys are in camp and how many do they run through there? Because to me, what's happened to me, what I've seen when you go to some of these places, that's what has hurt the hunting. For example, if you have 5,000 acres, if the outfitter has 5,000 acres and he runs 16 hunters per week through his season, and I'm going to say an average, if he has an average of 12 to 16 hunters a week from the 1st of October to the end of December, what does that equal out to per hunter per acre?
Hunting pressure, a lot of hunting pressure.
Right. 16 hunters per week to 12 hunters per week on 5,000 acres, that comes out, I believe, to 40 acres a person, which is not good. That's not good.
Yeah, it really cuts down your overall experience and your opportunity because you got so much pressure out there. One of the things I think is important, too, that Daryl brought up in our last episode was, you get all that hunting pressure out there and you wind up educating the deer from an overpressure perspective, and then it pushes them off.
Stop and think about that for just a second, everyone. Think about this. This is a serious matter. If you're going to pay $3,000 to $6,000 to have an outfitter take you hunting. If I go into a stand the first week in October, and then another guy goes into that stand. Now, don't get me wrong. They have lots of stands, most of them. They can move you around all over the place. But when I have been there, I have noticed that pressure has bothered the hunting. So if they send a hunter in, and they're going to have to, and we're using 5,000 acres, don't forget that's an example. Sometimes they have more properties than that, no doubt. But you can figure that out if they answer the question of how many people they run through their facility per year. So 16 guys or 12 guys a week, I think that works out to about 100 people per season.
That's a lot of pressure.
That's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of pressure. You go in and out of a stand every day for X amount of days, I guarantee you that, most of the deer are going to be scared. They're going to move to somewhere else on the property, which then brings up another subject. I kind of notice this, and I don't think our viewers, and which could become clients someday to an outfitter, I don't think they're going to know this until they get into the camp. And this is absolutely something I have noticed through the years. So you go to a camp, you hire an outfitter, you go into camp, you find out once you get there that there's guys that have come back year after year, which is what anybody that does guiding,
repeat hunters, yeah,
wants. They want repeat customers. Now, talking to some of these guys in camp, I have noticed that some of them have been there 4, 5, 6, 7 years in a row, never got a deer. To me, that's absolutely, that's bad. And so,
why would you come back if it's not just one of those outings for the boys? I mean, if you're serious about hunting and you're going to go out and you're going to invest in an outfitter and you're not having any success, why keep coming back?
That's a good question. I think it could be a lot of things. You know what we're here for, right? We're here to tell our end of the story, and believe me, this is session 1 on outfitters. We're not going to be able to cover it all tonight. We're going to have more than one session on this subject, and
this will be a 3-session. This will be a 3-session podcast.
We're going to get around to that, but I think sometimes people just like the camaraderie, the food, the getting outdoors. They may not be so concerned about getting a deer. So if you're concerned about getting a deer, you really want to listen to us and our experiences, and we can tell you what actually happened to us and what am I saying there's more bad outfitters out there than good outfitters? No, I'm not. I can only tell you what's happened to me and what I've seen. And most outfitters that I have been to, they have what we call special friends. That's kind of where I want to take that.
Okay.
They have special people that have been back over and over again, haven't complained, haven't said anything bad to them. They seem to work with those guys more than they do the guy that's a first timer. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I have seen those people have more success than the guy that only comes there once in a while, or the guy that questions them, or the guy that has experience. And I have discussed this with Daryl and some of the other guys in the industry. And it seems like when they find out you've already shot some big deer and you have some experience in the outdoors, and I mean you've hunted a few years, right? They kind of seem to treat you a little bit different. And you're going to ask me why. I mean, when you're sitting there, you can just tell. So you want to take a look at all of those things, and if they don't want to answer those questions, then you kind of might want to avoid it.
Well, it seems like kind of a bad sales model to me, right? So if you got new people that are coming into your camp, new people that are coming making reservations with you to go on a hunt, and yet you aren't giving them the same hunting experience as some of the repeat customers, you're not creating a model where you're creating new repeat customers. And at the end of the day, everybody ages out.
Yep.
So I want to break things down here a little bit. You mentioned quite a few items. So I want to back up here and I want to go through a little bit of lodging. So if you can, describe for me what you would consider to be a great lodging experience that you've had, and what makes that experience in your mind an important factor when you're picking or reviewing an outfitter.
So we're on lodging.
Yes.
Well,
yes.
I mean the facility it doesn't take a rocket scientist, right, to figure out that the facility is nice. some examples, I can give you some examples. Like if you're going to have guests in a 12 to 16 people at your facility, then you're going to want to make sure before they get there that you're going to have enough heat. And I'm trying to keep from laughing. You're going to have enough heat. You're going to have enough electricity. You're not going to run out of electricity.
Food,
because when it comes to cooking, you're going to need electricity, right? Now, believe it or not, you can have a nice looking building and all the facilities, but if all that other stuff fails, then you're going to have some people that are unhappy. And an example, so think about this for just a second, everybody. If I have 16 guys in my camp at $3,000 a head, $3,000 a head, how much did I just make in that 5 days? $30,000, right?
yeah, it's a pretty good chunk of money, that's for sure.
So you would think that normally everybody would have that under control. I would say out of all the states that I just mentioned and all of the outfitters that I have used off and on elk hunting and deer hunting, there has been generally most of them have terrific food, terrific cooks, and a really nice facility. Has stuff happened as I just suggested? Yes, it has. Did I know it was going to happen before I got there? No, I didn't. But that's a lot of money to be making, and that's per week, right? If somebody made between $20,000 and $30,000 for 6 weeks to 7 weeks, $200,000 to $300,000, you're gonna, you would expect full service.
Well, I know because we've talked about this previously as well. It's amenities all the way around. It's not just the lodging. So you talked about having a hunt out west where you had a problem with your horses when you were packing in. You guys wound up being miles away from base camp, up in a remote camp, and in a forward base, if you will, and there was no backup plan for horses who wound up getting scared off on you guys. So it's amenities as a whole. It's not just lodging, right?
Right. I'm glad you brought that up. So, listen, when you go on an outfit, you get excited, right? It's going to be a lot of fun. They're going to have all the stuff for me.
Guided hunt, yeah.
I'm going to see some game. I'm going to have and your adrenaline gets built up. And you're really excited. You just can't wait until the day comes. And so the day comes, you go. So the outfitter we used that you're talking about, that was Montana. We were elk hunting, archery elk hunting. We loaded up from the base camp down at the lower elevation. Horses all looked good. The trailers they brought them in looked good. The young guys that were guides were very nice, awesome guys, very nice, good company, nice to be around. We got to the base camp, and this was a tent setup. We were in wall tents, the lodge tent, and then the dining tent, and then the guides had their own tent, which I would like to bring this up before I forget about it. Here's another thing, real quick. So when you're eating dinner, if you're in a lodge or in a wall tent, wherever you're at, you're eating dinner, sometimes it might not be such a good idea for the outfitter themselves to be sitting there eating with you. And if you drink beer and you drink and you do whatever you do, for them to be sitting there, because that's when you notice the
relationships between other hunters,
yes,
possibly?
That's when you see that. They have their own little secret groups that they talk amongst themselves. That you try to talk to that hunter how he did that day or where he went. He doesn't want to talk to you. All of these things are what I'm trying to teach you. So anyways, back to that hunt. Everything looked great. Again, I think that this particular and nice guy, the owner of the business was my guide. He was awesome to go up to climb around the mountains with, to go hunting with, to talk to be with. Great guy, great tried real hard, but I think it was like maybe his fourth or fifth year guiding archery. But you could absolutely 100% tell that rifle hunting was his game. His success rate, from me just being in the area, I could tell that it was a rifle place. It was a good rifle, excellent hunting spot for rifle. So, we had lots of issues, from little ones to big ones. Food was good. Guys were nice. He had nice stock for riding. Yes, we did have some problems with the stock. Some of us got thrown off a couple times from our own fault, from our own inexperience.
Well, difficulty in carrying your equipment, right?
That's exactly right. So he did not have scarabs for bows. He had scarabs for guns, but not for a bow. So you had to kind of sling. You had to have a sling and sling it over you, which means you can only handle the reins with one hand. Can't use your other hand to do anything. And Jay, I come from horses.
Yep.
So I'm not
absolutely.
an unexperienced horse rider.
Nope.
So we had problems, and here's a good one for you. So the guide and I were headed up the mountain, and we came up on two bulls and some cows that were in a park, and we stopped the horses and tried to get off and tried to work up on them, but it didn't work out. They took off. So we went into the drainage and started doing some calling, and one of the other guides called us back that was on a mountain over from us that could see where we were at with his binoculars, and he said, "Hey, the elk are back out in that field where you guys were at." So we worked our way back out, and we got back out there just in time to see our horses running across the park away. We're 7 miles in.
Unbelievable.
On foot now. And I think the elk might have scared the horses, and they broke their halters off the trees that they had them tied to, which didn't make any sense because we're in grizzly country too, right? So bear comes around.
Yeah.
Guess what? It's going to scare the horses.
Yeah, for
so there
sure.
was some stuff that didn't go right. We had some environment control that wasn't working out too well in our wall tent. Lost a pillow, lost a sleeping bag.
You guys wound up with them getting into
all of this
into your
stuff.
tent.
Yeah, right. So all of this stuff we've already experienced. We can tell our viewers things like this. It's and save you some time and maybe save you some money. But anyways, I've got an experience, and that's why we're going to have 3 sessions on this. When these experiences relate to, don't forget, when you're using horses or anything like that, get yourself in shape. Be ready to ride for miles. Be able to get off and not stumble, and be somewhat sore if you're not used to riding horses. And if you get thrown off, you get dumped, you might get hurt. So you got to think about all of that when you're hiring that type of outfitter. Not probably going to be using horses when you're deer hunting, but if you're thinking about elk hunting, then you're going to be using horses more than likely. I have other stories, and I'm assuming we can get into them in other sessions.
Well, yeah, I want to ask you a little bit here too about food, because you and I, years ago, we had a fishing trip that we went on up in Canada. It was a fly-in trip, and the food, the overall packing for that, there wasn't a lot of food that was brought to the event. Everybody brought a little bit, but it was one night worth of meat that was bought. And it wound up being a situation where people weren't catching fish until you and I really got into them. And that was a byproduct of you and I working with a guide that was on the island there, the caretaker, and really figuring it out. But just imagine if we wouldn't have gotten into the fish, how things might have went from a food perspective, because it was a 4-day event and meat was only purchased for one night.
Yep. I think, if I recall, and this relates to these hunting stories too, we were only allowed to have a certain amount of weight. Is that not correct? When we went to the camp?
Absolutely correct. We were allowed per person a certain amount of weight.
Yeah. So when they tell you this ahead of time, whether you're deer hunting or you're fishing, they tell you, well, you're only allowed 50 pounds or 100 pounds. That's pretty close to what is true. So you might think about what you take in. You might want to make sure you have some emergency snacks of some sort. I don't think that's ever become a problem, except a couple times fishing, that it's ever become a problem with the hunting. The last story I was talking about in Montana, they had plenty, and being outdoors in these wall tents it was nice. They had plenty of food, and they had wood burning stove in there for heat. It's cold out west when you go hunting. I don't care if it's September or not. It's cold in the morning when you get up to go out. And we were right next to a river out there too, by the way. And normally when it snows and rains somewhere, and you're either out in it or you're inside, that you're probably more than likely going to miss the day of hunting. So let's not forget that. And we were right next to a river there in Montana where we're at, and it actually almost flooded over into our camp. So there's
wow, that would have been ugly.
Yeah, it was getting it on. It rained hard for a whole day, and it usually doesn't do that out west. It rains a little bit and then quits. But you gotta kind of. That's why we're here, right? We're here to help people to ask the right questions when they're hiring somebody.
Well, I think I want to, in one of our 3 episodes here, one of the later episodes, I want to talk about what you're doing to prepare for emergency situations. What's your emergency response plan? How does that look? Are you thinking that through before you get out in the woods? But we'll cover that again in a later cast. But it's definitely critical for your experience as a whole.
Yep. They'll you're going to get a list from them of what you can take with you, regardless of whether you're going into the back country and you're going to be in a wall tent or you're going to be in a lodge. They'll give you a list. And when you're bow hunting in Illinois, Indiana, you can ask them, what I can bring and what I should need, especially if you're a novice and you're just getting into the game. You can ask them, nowadays you can use a crossbow, in archery. So not in every state, but in most of our tri-state area here, Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin, they have. But when you get out west, it's a different story. If you're handicapped or you got a shoulder issue or you can get a doctor's permission slip, then you can get a tag to use your crossbow. I mean, those are all things that you can look up in anybody's hunting booklet for their state.
Well, one of the things I want to talk about here too, you had mentioned properties and property management. So, you basically you're leaving yourself to the expertise of the outfitter, right? Because in a lot of these situations, you're going to a property that you're unfamiliar with. You're getting out on property that you expect the outfitter to be a subject matter expert with, to have blinds and facilities to be able to put you in to get you in general proximity to be successful. I know that your previous experience in southern Indiana, there was some question about the property and the management of itself. So talk a little bit, if you will, about that experience and what you found in that property, and then maybe share with us and the viewers here things that they should be doing to make sure they're not getting themselves isolated into a bad situation when they're picking an outfitter and properties.
Yeah. Well, so the southern Indiana trip, this in 25, was so bad that we left a day early. So there were 16 hunters in the camp, and 5 of them left early. 2 of them was my grandson and I. Here's the thing. You try to be as polite and as nice. Let's not all forget. There's no sense in being rude or mean. But one of the things I found out through the years, and not just this last trip, but In other trips, when you ask an outfitter questions, you kind of have to watch what you do. In other words, I mean, if you ask the outfitter, I have an idea for where a stand might be for them. Some of them don't take that kind of stuff very
They
nicely.
get offended because you
They
just
get offended.
bruise their ego.
Right. So you kind of have to make sure you find, and you can figure this out. You got to have an outfitter that works with you as a team, right? You're part of the team. Just because you haven't been there before doesn't mean that you can't be part of the team. So you're a team player, they're a team player, and you can tell when that's not happening. I will tell you this, and this has been hard for people to believe that I have talked to, my friends. Some of them kind of laughed at me when I told them this, that they couldn't believe that this happened to me. But I never saw a deer while I was hunting there. I never saw a deer going in the dark. I never scared a deer going in the dark to my stand that they put me in. I never scared a deer coming out of my stand at dark, at night. Sat all day. I never saw a deer with my binoculars at 200 to 400 yards away in some of the fields. If you ask me, that's embarrassing. And they ought to be disgraced, and they should have done something about it.
Well, that begs in the next question here from my perspective. What was it on the front end that attracted you to this place to begin with?
I visited there during the summer. I went to check it out myself. Apparently that day there was nobody to take me around except for the cook. I looked at the facility. The facility looked fine. I didn't actually look at the facility they put me in, but I looked at the facility. The property looked awesome going in there. In fact, we saw deer driving in there with a car, with my wife and I. We saw deer driving out. We saw deer in the area. The area looked good. It was crops with a lot of 80 acres parcels of woods. It looked good. So that tells you something, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Tells you something. There was a lot of hunting pressure there before I got there. My hunt was the first week in November. Should have been their rut. Should have been the most awesome part of the hunt. So they must have had a ton of pressure. And by the way, I'm in the first week in November, so 5 weeks have gone by in their hunting season already. Nobody had shot a deer except for a young man during the junior hunt in the very first week in October. Nobody shot a deer. Nobody saw a legal deer to shoot. When I say legal, most of these places have an inch mark for the deer. In other words, you can't shoot anything under 140.
So there's a size requirement. You
Right.
can't violate that.
That's right. You can get fined for doing it.
So I think that's also a good thing for
Yes.
our new hunters to know too. If you're getting out and you're gonna look at an outfitter to get involved with on a hunt, understand the rules before you get there, read them clearly, and make sure you know what you're getting into. If you're a new hunter, what are your prospects for a 4.5-4-year-old deer or something like that. If you're going out to shoot your first buck and you're going to go to an outfitter, you're spending an awful lot of money and you're limiting your opportunity.
Yep, these are all questions that you can ask them. There was a ton of things that went wrong there, and they knew it. I asked questions, I probed them, and I could tell that, and that's kind of why I left the day early. And they had farms they were hunting, and they had their own property that they had leased. So, the food was okay. The food was good. The lodging, there was some stuff that went wrong there too. So, I think if you ask enough questions, and a lot of the stuff that we pointed out on this session, you're going to find out whether they're there for you or not. There's a lot of outfitters that you can go to and get good food and have fun and have good lodging. Is the deer results what somebody who actually wants a deer Is that there? Maybe not. And this format and these sessions on this subject are going to help.
So let's talk a little bit about deer density. So you had mentioned when you and the missus went in on your initial recon of the location, you saw some deer going in, but then when you got out there for your actual hunt, nobody had seen any. The harvest was incredibly low. It seemed that the pressure was really high. So what's your, as we look around the room here in the wide shot, you can obviously see that you as a seasoned hunter can tell by walking into a woodblock, what your conditions are, what the deer density should be, what the signs look like, what you're looking for. And so you walk into this facility, you get in there, and you start seeing things that aren't really conducive for a successful trophy hunt, which is what you're looking for. And then you start asking questions about deer density. So where did that go with you?
They did move me around because I was suggesting things to them. They did move me. So I got moved about 6 times. Grandson, he got moved 3 or 4 times. And each one of those moves, the landscape looked terrific. The stands looked good. And we hunted in raised platforms. We hunted in hang-ons. The food plots they had planted looked awesome. And that's there tells you something else. So our food plots in Michigan, for example, where we have deer density, you got 40 acres and you got 10 deer on the property, for example. If you've got a small food plot, and their food plots were big, they were huge. They were like 2 to 5 acres, some of them. 2 to 4 acres, some of them.
Did you get a chance to walk through any of those food plots?
I did. And they had a mixture. Unfortunately, we couldn't have Daryl here tonight, who is the expert on that stuff. They had a mixture of plant in their food plot. In other words, they had beet.
Variety.
They had a variety of in there, and they were knee high. At that time of the year in Michigan, where you have a good deer density, that food plot would have been 8 to the ground.
So that should have told you right off the bat that there was potentially an issue when you're looking at the food plot and you don't see a lot of activity there.
Exactly. When you start questioning them about that, you don't see, unless other people were, when we came back at night for dinner, all of us in camp, there were other guys that had been there 2 or 3 times that were questioning them too. Sometimes people don't say anything. And they were questioning them too. They were starting to get, they were starting
Sounds
to think.
Like everybody was frustrated.
Yep. They were starting to question whether they were ever going to come back there again. And in case everybody doesn't know this, I used to deal with the public. I was a charter boat captain for many years on Lake Michigan. And I've had people ask me, well, Don, what are you going to do about that? If your hunt is bad and you just now found that out while you were there, the deer weren't there, the guides were bad, whatever. What are they going to do about that? Well, they could reschedule, and they did say to us, here's what their excuse was. They said it was an off year. Well, you shouldn't tell people things like that when I can physically find out what they did the year before or in the past.
They took your money anyway.
They took the money anyway. They could not maybe that year, but the following year these people were not going to give half your deposit back or your money back and reschedule you. But back in the day when I used to run charters, I would physically tell people the fishing's terrible. We'll give you your deposit back. We'll reschedule you another day. Yes, it's easier to do it fishing than it is hunting, but still. And I would literally tell them, the wind is going to be bad. We can't go out tomorrow. Maybe we'll get you next week. You can do stuff. You don't want your business to get ruined just because you want the money.
Well, I think that comes back to honesty and integrity, which we talked about earlier. And again, what I brought up was the sales model, if you will, for repeat customers. If you're going to be honest and provide some sense of integrity with your customers, it would seem to me that there would be a greater deal of loyalty and repeat business than there is if you're dishonest and just taking people's money.
Yeah. As we were leaving, Jay, our guide came over to so we were staying in our lodging was away from the main lodge. You could see them. They weren't that far away. He came over when we were loading the truck, and he said to me, he come over and he put his head down. He said, I understand you're probably disappointed, and I feel bad too. That's basically what he said to me. I mean, really? Didn't see a deer the whole time I was hunting there? I mean, there's basically one answer to that.
That's beyond disappointment.
I mean, there's basically, the pressure must have been so intense. Now, there were guys, granted, now there were 16 of us, right? They were scattered all over the place. There were guys that came back to the camp and saw a deer. They saw a deer. They didn't see any shooters, anything that was legitimately legal for them to shoot. And then 2 days, one of what I call their special friends, 2 days after everybody was gone, he shot a very big buck. I think it was 150, 160. And he had seen that deer. I heard him talking, but he wouldn't talk to me. I heard him talking to them in one of their secret little meetings. So if you think, here's the thing, if you're going to hire an outfitter and you think everything's going to go perfectly fine because they are in control and they have done this before and they know what to do and they know how to handle it, that can go backwards. That's the purpose of trying to find a legitimately good. And I have no problem going to an outfitter, having a great meal, great lodging, great company, and all of those other things, and not getting a deer. I thoroughly understand that, the fish don't bite, the deer don't come out. I understand all of that the weather has a issue with it. I understand all that. Don't get me wrong. I don't get a deer every year that I hunt on my own. I don't get a deer. I get all that, but I also know when there's something wrong. And not telling somebody, being honest, right? That's what we're looking for, honesty.
Yep, for sure.
And we're going to...
It's the overall experience.
That's right. In one of the sessions, we're going to give some people opportunity to speak, some of these outfitters, if they want. We're going to give them an opportunity to speak on this subject too. But what we're doing today is telling you what has happened to us in the past. And and you can tell, excuse me, by the states that we've been in and how much we've been doing this. And I still hunt around here every year. I've used the outfitters because I wanted to get away from hunting pressure around here. So it's not, when we get Daryl back on, hopefully Daryl can make the next session, and we've got a booking agent and another outfitter that we know that we're going to have on when we get into this even further. Everybody's going to have their opportunity to speak. Daryl has been in Canada. Daryl's been in Illinois. He had some bad experiences, some good experiences, and that's what made him decide not to ever use them again unless he absolutely has to. So I think we've covered a lot on this session tonight.
I got a question for you though before we
go ahead,
before we close in here in the end. So one of the things we talked about frequently is trail cameras and the use of that as an investigation tool as you're scouting and doing your preseason work and whatnot. And as people, as viewers, look to find an outfitter, speak to the question, if you will. What role does a trail camera or trail cameras play in your selection of an outfitter, or should it play in your selection of an outfitter as you make your decision on what outfitter you want to choose? And in addition to that, did you get an opportunity to see any trail camera footage from the place that you had the bad experience with in Indiana?
I did see some. It was all at night, and it was not while we were there. None of the pictures were from when we were there. They were before. And that's a good question, Jay. So some outfitters absolutely hate trail cameras. Some outfitters rely on them extensively. And I had one outfitter tell me this. I asked them, why, and this was an elk hunt in New Mexico. I asked them, why don't you use trail cameras on your water holes, on your seeps, where you have some of your stands where you know the elk are drinking water? And I'm going to give you a couple examples when I get done with this one. And this is what the outfitter said to me. If I put a trail camera there and I show you the pictures of the elk that are visiting that water hole and this and that, then everybody's going to want to go there. So I've elected not to do that because I don't want to pick and choose who gets to go there. I've had other outfitters tell me, they use their trail cameras to find out their deer density, where the deer are traveling and where they're feeding, which is good, right? That's what you want to do. That's what we want to do at home. But do we want to rely on them to? Well, we've seen a buck on that food plot every night for the last 5 nights, and so we're going to put you over there. Well, I think that's probably a good idea. I think that, and I had a outfitter do that to me in Illinois, and they did use that source, and they did put me there, and I did see deer there. I didn't see anything legal that was shoot at. That the deer, they said, had been there the last 3 days. So I think trail cameras for the outfitters is good for 3 things. So they know what deer is on their property, so they can not have disappointment like happened to me in Indiana. 2, so they can use it for advertisement on their websites, so they can throw up all the pictures of all these great big bucks they've been videotaping and seeing early season, and that works out good for them. And we're probably going to give you some examples of that in our future podcast when we start flying our drone around.
Yeah, for sure.
We're gonna
I'm looking.
We're gonna show you what that's like for you to see deer. All of that is great, and until it comes down to the hunt, as we spoke about in our last podcast when Daryl was on, about what Daryl does with his cameras and what I do with my cameras. I'm trying to find out what size of deer and what deer are there when I use the trail camera. I think that the outfitter in general is using it to show the public what he sees on his camera at that time.
Some marketing, probably more marketing than anything, but at least from the outfitter's perspective, I mean, you want to have good experiences for all your hunters, the best that you can, and you want to be able to provide them with the best experience. At least you should have that attitude, some sense of customer satisfaction, right? But at the end of the day, let's just say your trail cameras aren't even on your property. Your trail cameras are someplace else where deer are, and your property isn't that good, and you're just playing the game of trying to make quick money off somebody. Well, that sounds kind of like the experience that you had down in southern Indiana. But at the end of the day, it comes back again to honesty and integrity. What are you using the cameras for? What are you really gathering intelligence about the density of your deer herd, the movement through your food plots, the placement of your tree stands, that kind of intelligence, or are you just out for a marketing ploy?
Yep. I think that a guy like me and anybody that has hunted deer knows when, and it relates to fishing too. If you're hiring a charter boat or an outfitter for to fish or to hunt, when they're doing a good job. When they're trying their hardest. if you're a novice hunter, you may not know that stuff. And I think that's what sometimes they prey on. They want new, fresh novice guys that aren't going to ask those questions. And I'm talking about the ones that are interested in just taking your money.
Yeah.
Yes, they gave you
Yeah.
good food. Yes, they
Yeah.
gave you a place to sleep and a good lodging. Yes, they transported you around and all of that. They can do that fairly easy. But, and I think each one of them does it. So if you go on a fully guided hunt, let's say where the guide actually goes with you to the stand or in the field, whatever game you're hunting, if it's elk, if it's deer, if it's mountain goat, if it's sheep, if it's antelope, I don't care what it is. If the guide is not going with you or going with you, I think that makes a difference too. And it makes a difference in price. So those are things to remember too. And when the guide just takes you to your stand and drops you off and then leaves, whether he was on a quad or he was in his truck and he dropped you off on the road and you walked into the field, all of those things should make somewhat of a difference to you about how you want to hunt and where you want to go.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's great. So, well, let's tie this one off with a few last thoughts here. I think we covered a lot of things. We went through lodging, food, properties, deer density. Really, we talked about experience and the individual hunter's knowledge, which plays a role here. And we talked about doing your own recon and research ahead of time to make sure that you're trying to find an outfitter that's going to satisfy or at least bring you some satisfaction for the amount of money that you're spending. If you would just wrap it up and share your thoughts on this whole prospect of getting an outfitter.
Good. Well, as we speak every day before we go online and we talk about whatever the subject matter is, we're trying to be different and we're trying to be truthful. So we think that the truth is simple, right? But when you go to try to explain it, it becomes difficult. And that's what we're trying to do, not make it difficult. We're trying to explain what's happened to us and what we know to be truthful and in our experiences. And if it hasn't happened to us and we can't find it out, then, and that's what we'll try to do. We'll try to find it out.
Yeah, I think that's critically important. So the objective here, again, for Quest Outdoors is to make sure that you have the tools you need to have a successful outdoor experience, regardless of what it is, from the hunt in and of itself, safety, security, the overall lodging experience, from the novice to the advanced. So we here at Quest Outdoors, we encourage you to reach out to us, send us a DM, ask us in the comments about some of the specific guides. We can give you more information personally as we move through podcasts and through this series of 3 at least. And as for Quest Outdoors, Jay and Don here, keep it real. Your adventure starts here.